Welcome to Because the Beatles, the podcast about the Beatles, everything about the Beatles 24/8. I'm Allison.
And I'm Erica. And before we start, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, or stream us on Spotify. And if you're enjoying BC the Beatles, feel free to leave us a preferably 5-star review so other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll be posting videos, photos, and more from this episode and beyond. And don't forget, you can always email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com. Hi, Erica.
Hi. How's it going?
It's going, pandemic. Happy, good, fun times.
Yeah, pandemic times. It's nice to see you virtually a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. We if any of our listeners were there, we did an appearance at the Fest for Beatles fans, the virtual Fest for Beatles fans, in a room called the Laboratory all day on Saturday. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the highlight of the day for me was Flaming Pie.
Oh yeah, that was great. I mean, we did a little listen through the original album with our friend Jeremy, who was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Always fun to hang out with Jeremy virtually.
Yeah. Hi, Jeremy. I hope you're listening.
Hi, Jeremy. We talked about the original album, and we'll be talking about the new reissues coming out. We got some copies, and I'm going to be doing an unboxing on Instagram Live after this episode goes up. So please follow us at BC the Beatles on Instagram, and we'll post when that will be happening. So that's something to look forward to. But yeah, the fest, it was so cool to have it happen live, virtually.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we got to talk to a lot of Beatle buddies that usually get to see, especially in Chicago Fest, which is the one that happens in August traditionally. And that's the best fest.
Yeah, so. It is the best fest.
It was really nice to see all of our friends and see their faces and to see some really good concerts. Of course, my forever crush, Lawrence Juber. Was playing.
I know you're looking forward to that. We need to have him on here, and you can just giggle like a schoolgirl the whole time.
That will be great.
I think that would be great, personally.
Yeah, you will think that's funny.
Indeed.
And I'm like, you're so talented. I can't talk to you because you freak me out. And you played with Paul.
Oh my gosh. Well, that'll be just the whole interview. It's just alternating tell me Paul stories, and also just play some Spanish riffs on your guitar, on your acoustic guitar, Lawrence Juber.
I'm going to be like that skit that's remember when you were in the Beatles with Paul McCartney and Saturday Night Live?
With Chris Farley?
Yes.
That was awesome. Yes, it's going to be you, Lawrence Juber.
Remember when you played on Back to the Egg? That was so cool.
That's great. I mean, I don't know that anybody would turn down an opportunity to be fawned over.
We'll have an adult interview, a nice.
Yes. One day we will have Mr. Juber on. It will be fantastic.
Yes. And another session that we were hosting in the laboratory in the fest was this fun session about the Beatles and mental health.
Yeah. God, at this time in our lives, it's so important to embrace music as a form of therapy. I know it's been a real therapeutic thing for me to just kind of end my day listening to music, and obviously the Beatles are a big part of that. And we met an artist named Magic, and he came in and showed us a video that he made. Magic lives in the Philippines, and he met another artist called Kat Fields. She lives in the Netherlands, and they collaborated on a video of Beatles covers, just snippets of Beatles covers. That's very, very cool. It came from a place of wanting to give something to Beatles fans, just to have a happy moment in these crazy times.
Yeah, and all the songs that they featured were All You Need Is Love and Let It Be, and just songs that are calming in the face of strife and anxiety. It was a really nice thing.
And we'll put a link to it in the show notes too, so you can take a look.
Yeah.
It's really nice. It's 14 minutes of just lovely collaboration, and Magic plays the guitar and Kat sings, and it's just very I found it very soothing and kind of nice to start the morning off.
And Magic has such a nice, happy, gentle spirit. So
yeah, he's a sweetheart.
Somebody that you wanna watch.
Definitely. Hi, Magic. He's probably listening, so
I hope so.
I hope so too. So one other thing that we wanted to mention before we get into our awesome interview with Dale Roberts, talk about some Cavern Club myths and rumors. We're starting to do giveaways. Yay!
Yay! Hooray!
Yay! So we have a ton of stuff. I have a ton of crap in my apartment. Not crap, good stuff.
Great Beatles stuff, not crap.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about like signed copies of books that have been generously given to us by some of our guests. I have Bruce McMouse posters from when Bruce McMouse was in theaters last year,
Which was
uh,
amazing.
which was
So
so good.
you want one of these? I want another one of these.
I'll save you one. You can have one from my stash.
Yeah.
I think I think we have a copy. Don't we have an extra copy of the Beat the Beatles New York Post?
Yep.
Which is legendary. I mean, we have a bunch of assorted stuff. I want to say this for my favorite Beatles thing of the week, but just a preview, I have stuff from Strawberry Field in Liverpool to give away, that
Ooh.
I, have in my possession, and just like a bunch of, fun Beatles stuff. So here's how you're going to get it. We are going to give away something at the end of the month to somebody who's given us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you do that, make sure you email us at bcthebeatles@gmail.com with a link or some identifying way of telling us if that's your review, and put the word giveaway in the subject, and we'll choose a winner. Easy
Yeah, and if
peasy.
you've already given a review, thank you so much for doing that, and you are still eligible. Just do the same thing. Send us an email letting us know which one is you, and we'll include you in the monthly drawing.
Please go for that, because we want to disperse all this fun stuff to y'all and spread the love.
Oh, yeah.
So today on the podcast, we have a very special guest. Dale Roberts is here. He is the youngest Beatles tour guide, not only on the Magical Mystery Tour, but in Liverpool. He's also the social media manager for Cavern City Tours and marketing coordinator as well. In 2019, Dale set up the extremely popular behind-the-scenes tour of the Cavern Club, which we're going to talk about. And it takes guests on a 45-minute journey around Matthew Street and the Cavern Club. He also helped develop hop-on, hop-off tours in Liverpool. Dale also has his own tour company, which specializes in, and I'm very excited to do this next time I'm in Liverpool, Beatles pub crawls. And he's also a freelance writer and blogger. So Dale, yay, thanks for being on Because the Beatles. Welcome.
I have to say that was some write-up, wasn't it? That was impressive.
Yeah, I think, did you do that?
I don't think I did that, no. I was wondering where you found that information on me. I thought, well, am I so open online? Is there too much information out there about me?
Well, there's too much info about everybody, I'm pretty sure. So, but it's a good resume. I was thinking this morning, I'm super excited because I think you're the first person from Liverpool we've had on the podcast.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
this is a big deal. Here's a question.
Yeah.
So do we as Americans call you a Liverpudlian, or can we say Scouser?
You can say Scousers. It's actually one of the most asked questions that I get. Is Scouser an offensive phrase? It's not. No, not at all. It's completely non-offensive. It depends on how it's used. I will be honest about that. But Liverpudlians, Scousers, Northerners can all be used in an offensive kind of way. But if you know anything about Liverpudlians, we're not that offended, especially these days, I like to think.
Right. And the term scouse, I was talking to a friend this morning and she's like, where does that come from? And I'm like, well, does it come from the dish? Does it come from the dialect?
It's ironic, by the way, because earlier on today, this is linked to the story, by the way. Earlier on today, I went out to the shop and bought all the ingredients to make a pan of scouse. Okay,
Yes.
So literally just before I came on air at the minute, I quickly rushed a bowl of scouse down myself. So it's very apt that you'd ask that question, because you had no idea that it's just like
I
a bowl of
didn't.
scouse. Yeah.
We didn't plan this at all.
So the history of it is of course Liverpool being a seaport, with the River Mersey, everything like that. The sailors would go across Scandinavia and the likes, and we got a reputation for liking a Norwegian dish, a Scandinavian dish called lobscouse, and the sailors were so known for eating so much scouse that they just became known as scousers. Now that is the traditional answer, of course, when it comes to many people. If you are from Liverpool and you're listening right now, you've probably heard a different reason as to why it was called scousers, but that is probably the most authentic. It was an old sailor term for the seamen who came from Liverpool. And they all became known as Scousers, and it's now Liverpool's national dish. And I'm saying national on purpose, by the way. It's our national dish. Whenever anyone comes to Liverpool, they have to have a bowl of scouse. So Did you have a bowl of scouse when you came to Liverpool?
Actually, it's funny, I have been to Liverpool many times, but only this last time when I met you at the Cavern
Yeah.
did I have my first bowl of scouse.
Okay, okay. And what did you think of it?
I loved it. I mean, I love, like, a stewy kinda, like, comfort food dish,
Yeah.
so it was cold. I was there in February, so I was down by the Beatles story, and I stopped into, like, a tiki bar on Albert Dock and had a bowl of scouse and, like, a Mai Tai, and it was great.
Okay, okay. Well, truthfully, it's strange for me to cook a bowl of scouse now in August. That is the weirdest thing in the
I was
world.
gonna
Honestly,
say,
because
yeah.
now my house is absolutely boiling hot, so I had no purpose because you've got to keep it on a low heat for a good 4 to 5 hours. And the tradition, realistic, scouse tastes better the next day. Just for anyone who's
Ooh,
listening
yeah.
out there who wants to know any top tips for scouse, you leave it overnight and it tastes significantly better the next day. Yeah, but I've had it
Mm.
on a heat for 5 hours, and my apartment that I live in is absolutely roasting hot. And to make sure I've
Oh,
got the
man.
best possible audio right now, I've closed all my windows, and I'm dying. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh my
I think
god.
I've got
Well,
5 minutes left before they melt.
we gotta hurry. You're sacrificing yourself for this interview. Thank
Seriously,
you.
putting my body on the line. Yeah, yeah.
I you guys have crock pots. I mean,
Have,
it might save your life
have
over
what?
there.
What's that?
A crock pot.
A crock pot? What's that?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna change your life. A crock pot is like a pot, but you plug it in, it's electrical, and you can cook something, like, on low or high for, like, 4 or 5
Okay, we call
hours,
that a
and it
slow cooker over here in
oh, yeah,
Liverpool.
slow
For the
cooker,
slow
same
cooker.
thing.
Yeah, okay. Crock pot.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember that.
It's like a brand, I guess. It's like, calling a garbage can a dumpster. It's like a brand that's become, like, the synonym for what it is,
Yeah.
so,
Well, knowing my luck,
yeah.
my son watches a massive amount of YouTube at the minute, and loads of different
Mhm.
YouTubers, and he starts saying garbage and trash and a lot of other American words that I'm like, where have you learned this, man? YouTube. He's learned it from YouTube. And that's yeah.
We're warping his mind with our American literal garbage.
Seriously, yeah.
Well, I wanna talk about Liverpool a little bit since you are our first Scouser, I
Okay.
can say that. I am so curious, what is it like growing up in Liverpool having the Beatles as your hometown boys? Like, what's the feeling by the locals there?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person for one. For me, I'm extremely proud to come from Liverpool. I'm extremely proud that the Beatles came from Liverpool. And I remember a few years back, it was the craziest thing when I really started obsessing about the Beatles. And I have a very strange brain that does that. The second I get into a subject or a topic, I can study it in depth, and I'm fortunate enough that I can learn it quite quick. But I was probably about 2021, and I realized, hold on, George Harrison was born just around the corner almost. And I got in the car and it was just like, George Harrison's, here I am. And I just stood outside the house and just Googled the information that was relevant. The best tour in the world, of course, Google. Just
Mhm,
Googled it and I was like, wow. And I was in awe. And then all of a sudden, I was going out drinking in the Cavern Club. And then, of course, I remember going outside the Casbah and standing at the bottom of Hayman's Green and just being like,
mm,
wow. And that for me, it was crazy. And I always say that the most magical thing for me is there were four, and John Lennon says this himself, and it's a fantastic quote of his in the Anthology album. They were just four normal lads from Liverpool who made it very, very big.
mhm.
It's as simple as that. For me, I find it quite magical that for myself, I had a very similar upbringing. I was born in Walton, so County Road, a very working class area, we call it over here. And Paul McCartney, the world's greatest ever songwriter, musician, and composer, he was born like literally a stone's throw away from where I was brought up. The
Wow.
Walton Hospital is literally at the top of my road. Yeah, it's crazy.
Mm,
And in Liverpool, we take it for granted, and we always have done ever since the early '60s and the Merseymeet movement. It was just another thing in this city. in a way, and ever since it's been viewed as such. I think so. If you asked any other Scouser, they might go, "Oh yeah, we get fed up with the Beatles." You know, whenever they go on holiday, for example, around the world, it's, "Oh, you're from Liverpool, the Beatles," and that's it. You know,
Yeah, it's
seriously.
true. Whenever I hear somebody with, like a northern accent, I'm always like, "Oh, okay, don't mention the Beatles. Don't do it." I always do. It's
You've
I
got to,
can't
you've got to do it. I mean, I,
I
I
have
like
to.
to think realistically we're known around the world for music and football, and of course the music is the Beatles, and the football is Liverpool FC, of course. So these days you do get a lot more like Steven Gerrard. You know, whenever I've went anywhere else, it's either the Beatles or Steven Gerrard that people mention. Strangely enough, yeah.
Who's that?
Who is Steven Gerrard? Wow.
I don't know
He was
anything
the
about
captain of
football.
soccer. I have just said soccer. I feel sick with me. I'm only joking.
You don't
Uh,
have to say
no,
soccer.
the football. Steven Gerrard was the captain of Liverpool Football Club for a good, I'd say about 11 or 12 years. And
Oh,
he was legendary. He was the England captain as well. Yeah, and he ended up moving to the States. He moved to LA. There you go.
oh, great. I'll say hi to him,
Yeah, if you
I'll
bump into him. Yeah.
see him in the grocery store. Yeah. Maybe he's one of the ones where I'm like, "Hey, are you from Liverpool?"
You probably did the Beatles.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, it's that guy. Oh, yeah, he hates me. Well, but so you said you had the realization at 21. Is that when you became a Beatles fan?
um,
Hardcore?
it's a terrible, terrible confession to make, but yes, I was roughly around 19 or 20. I remember one of the first moments, I was actually about 15. I was on a car journey from a place in the United Kingdom called Wales, a beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful country. And we were driving back. It was a 3 hour, 4 hour journey, and we had the Beatles on. And of course, I knew every word to every one of the Beatles' greatest hits, because I was from Liverpool and it's expected that we know all the words. Um, and I remember that was my first real, the Beatles are great. Wow, incredible band. I'm proud that they came from Liverpool. I was probably about 16. Um, but I remember I was planning my wedding. I was married for 5 years, and I remember we had a Beatles song at the wedding, and that was another moment. I just wanted a piece of the city, at the wedding ceremony, in effect. But it
Mhm.
came from a cultural pride. But this is crazy. I probably think I'm the only Beatles fan who was ever converted into a hardcore Beatles fan from this song. But it was one day I was listening. I can't even remember what rubbish compilation album I was listening to, but there was the John Lennon solo song "Dear Yoko" on there.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely adore it. So you've got Oh Yoko and Dear Yoko, but I'm not going to sing it. No one wants to hear that.
Oh, dear go.
There
Yeah,
you go.
there.
Got it. With that in tune. That was beautiful. Get
Aw, thanks.
karaoke going now. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to that song, and I remember I'd never heard it before in my life. And I was
Mm.
21, and I was driving in the car. And I was like, wow, that song, wow. But John's voice was completely different. And as we know, in the 70s, John had more of a nasally voice than he did in
Mhm.
the early 60s with the Beatles. So all of a sudden, I was like, I've never listened to any of John's solo stuff really, apart from Imagine, of course. And all of a sudden, I was like, I need to listen to them. I really should not confess this. I hope that there's not a statutory, limitations on this. But I remember going home after that car journey and going on a little piece of software I had called LimeWire all those years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Terrible, I
Oh,
know,
yeah.
how disgusting of me. Um,
Big fan.
yeah, well, I literally littered my computer full of hundreds of thousands of viruses and downloaded every John Lennon solo album. And I religiously listened to Lennon, and then all of a sudden I was like, hold on, George Harrison. And I started religiously listening to Harrison, and then all the McCartney solo albums as well. And yeah, that was that
Yeah.
really. Uh,
And then you listen to Ringo's good song and you're
We've
like,
we
"I'm good."
eventually got to Ringo's albums, yeah. No, I'm only joking. I love Ringo, and I will be the Liverpool 8 album. I absolutely adore. It's one of
Oh,
my
yeah?
whenever I do a Magical Mystery tour. So that obviously you said earlier on that I guide on there. It's a staple part of my tour to play the Liverpool 8 song by Ringo while driving through Liverpool. I just think that it's perfect. It's a great song. Yeah. Um,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's how I got into the Beatles. I religiously listened to them excessively, and then I got obsessed with the songs, the meanings behind the songs, and then I got obsessed with the Paul is Dead conspiracy, and I was hooked on it. Could not stop
Uh,
researching the Paul is Dead conspiracy, and then I researched every other fan theory, And then all of a sudden, I was driving around the city at every Beatles attraction, looking at the houses and being like, "Wow, this is such a big deal." And from that moment on, I was a crazy, super fan in a way.
Oh, that's so cool. We have one of our early episodes was all Paul is dead, so we are big fans of that as
I
well.
will say, for anyone under the age of 30 who comes on a Magical Mystery Tour, it's the most asked question for me.
What
Normally, you get to
is
Strawberry
Paul
Field. Is Paul McCartney dead? Was he replaced by an imposter? Every time I get to Strawberry Field, of course, you've been to Strawberry Field and seen the gates. All
dead?
the gates is just R.I.P. Paul, Billy Shears. There's massive big. So the second you get there, I see younger people, people in their 20s who've spent years watching YouTube conspiracy theories and pointing at the wall and just going and sniggering. And then I smile and they go, "Is Paul dead? Do you think Paul's dead?" And I'm like, there's literally not a chance that Paul McCartney is dead. And I generally break it down and go, the odds of finding someone as good as Paul McCartney, left-handed, who looked exactly like him and covering it up. I said, the odds of that happening is impossible. So that's generally my bog standard answer to that one.
It's reassuring to hear from you that Paul is not dead.
Yeah, but it's good to know that Liverpool tour guides are not going around perpetuating that myth.
Yeah, right? You're trying to cut it off.
Exactly.
So who's your favorite Beatle?
I don't have a favourite. If I was forced, I'd probably say John. I think that I
Mhm.
like to think John is, for me, almost the definition of human art. He was a rough kid from a difficult background, and he grew up to be a man who's known now for his legacy of peace and love. And I think it's a beautiful legacy. I love his message, especially throughout the 70s. I love the message of give peace a chance. All you need is love, and it's. I just think he was genius musically.
Mm,
And I think politically as well, I love the messages that he was coming out with, especially in the early 70s, And,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But then
The
George
validate.
Harrison overtakes him sometimes. And I go, I love George, absolutely adore him. And then 2018, Paul McCartney did so much for Liverpool that all of a sudden I was
Right.
like, I love Paul McCartney. He was my favourite. And then Ringo. Yeah. Ringo. I
And then
love Ringo. He's a great guy.
well, that's great. I mean, Ringo is pretty much like Switzerland, I think, with the Beatles. He's there and he's cool.
No, but you've got to appreciate Ringo. I love him, and the Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles without Ringo.
That's true.
Without a
That's
shadow of a doubt, what he did for the band, the attitude and demeanor he had as well. That
mm,
was what was lovable about him. It was like he was along for the ride. He was like a fan almost. I think that's how
yeah.
people. Whenever I speak about Ringo to people, they were like, "It's like he was along for the ride." That's rubbed off on me over time. I do think, that he was. He was the fun, sort of Beatle in the background, wasn't he? By the time you get into Abbey Road, it's impossible to ignore how great Ringo was by the time you're at Abbey Road.
Definitely there was no other drummer for the Beatles but Ringo. Credit to Pete Best, but I think Ringo was the guy.
Massive credit to Pete. Pete Best upped his Twitter game, hasn't he? On Twitter, the best
Yeah.
tweets that have went out have blew me mind how great they are. Ringo's birthday. Oh, it was just brilliant.
Oh, yeah. Pete has definitely created a little footprint for himself on Twitter. He's hilarious.
He literally is.
He's great. Uh, well, I would love to know. So we mentioned some of the roles that you have. You have many. Can you give us like a little bit of a breakdown of each of the things that you do in Liverpool? Because not all of us have been there and had the opportunity to take the Magical Mystery Tour, for example, or see the Cavern Club.
Okay, now with me, it was about 4 years ago. I accidentally fell into tour guiding. I joined a company. It was a hop on, hop off tour bus company, and it was 3-4 weeks after joining, and the director sat down with me and he said, "Listen, we want to design a Beatles tour, and you're a huge Beatles fan." And before then, I'd done some local writing and things like that. So people knew I was a big Beatles fan. It was already out there. And I'd worked for the Beatles Museum and the Beatles story on the Albert Dock. And I was like, okay, I'll write a Beatles story. And so I started the plans for it, and then we brought in another guy, fantastic tour guide, Lee. He came in and he started designing the tour alongside me. And all of a sudden, the idea evolved. It was no longer just a private Beatles tour; it was a hop-on, hop-off service bus tour. So all of a sudden, the company transformed. And then one day, we couldn't get any tour guides. and I had a history of public speaking, and I had the knowledge of the Beatles, and all of a sudden it was like, Dale, you need a tour guide. I was like, that's not going to happen. Like, I'm not a guide. I said that. Back then, it was the last direction I ever wanted to head in. I didn't want to be a tour guide, you know. And then all of a sudden it was like, Dale, you need a guide on this tour. And then they threw me in the deep end, and off I went on the tour bus. Very, very unprofessional thinking back, you know, throw a guy on, and you know, I had no one on there coaching me or anything, and it was 72 people on an open top tour bus, and I
Mm.
guided to them, and so that was how I got into tour guiding, and all of a sudden it became apparent that, and I don't want to sound arrogant or big headed when I say this, but it seemed that I was quite good at it. You know, I was getting brilliant customer feedback all of a sudden, and it went from there. So I was head of marketing for the company, and I was also then a tour guide. And then all of a sudden, my job was almost 50-50. I was doing loads of tour guiding. And then one day, the Cavern City Tours got in touch with me and said, "We want you working for us." By that time, the tour that we had designed for the open top buses was shortlisted for 2 regional awards. I'd been shortlisted for Regional Tourism Star of the Year, something I was very proud of. And all of a sudden, I was almost like an established tour guide. So, of course, qualified a little while later. And here I am. So, my main job, as I say, is I look after all the social media for the Cavern Club. So everything that goes on, like, well, for the Cavern City Tours, so it's about 18 different social media accounts. And then as well as that, it was about 18 months ago, after already guiding on the Magical Mystery Tour for quite some time, they said, Dale, for the first time, we want to set up behind the scenes tours of the Cavern, and we want you to set them up. So I was extremely proud of that one. It was a lot of stress. I had to research so much because, of course, as we know, there is a significant amount of myth about the Cavern, a significant amount of rumour surrounding the Cavern Club as well. Its history is very long, and lots of the myth, you understand why people believe these certain things about the Cavern. And that's what I've had to do for the past 16 to 18 months. I take people around the Cavern Club explaining the long history of the venue.
Yeah, and let's get into that a little bit because, I've talked about it on the podcast before when I came back from Liverpool in February that, when I took your tour, I learned so much. And of course, I've been, researching and being a Beatles fan for like 20 years now, but it's like I had those misconceptions. I was
Mm.
always like, oh, the cavern's on the other side of the street, and this isn't even like where it was, and there's like it's a parking lot, rumor and all that. I was just like it blew my mind a little bit, so I have to give you credit for that because you surprised me.
When you're in that situation, you can actually show someone, hold on, this is where this exact place was, right here, right where you stood. And if you can put things actually into the perspective and the orientation of Matthew Street, then it makes a bit more sense. But I think, unfortunately, and it's something I battle with all the time, is the Wikipedia page for the Cavern. I battle with the mods quite excessively. The army of them on there. The second I try and fill in the history and source it correctly, all of a sudden it just gets removed, and all of a sudden it's back on, and the online information isn't as clear as it should be. That's the problem we have.
Well, we don't need to worry about that because we're going to set the record straight right
There
now.
we go.
And this podcast is a massive deal, and so this will take care of it. You
Mm,
never have to worry about it again.
good. Okay, that's a promise. I've got that.
Mm, absolutely, absolutely. So let's start with what was, I don't know, I think it might be the biggest misconception, certainly in my mind, the first time I went to Liverpool, which I don't know, 2008. And I totally went down Matthew Street, like holier than thou, being like, this isn't even the real Cavern Club. Mm. Um, so a lot of people say the Cavern was originally on the opposite side of the street.
Yes.
What is the rebuttal?
um, it's untrue. There's a tiny bit of truth in it, in as much as it was not there in the first place. The way in which the Cavern history, it'd be helpful to view it. It's not the way it should be viewed because it's realistically only me and a handful of other tour guides and of course the owners and directors and staff who know the full story. The way in which I always say it, the Cavern is in multiple stages. You have it from 1957 when it first opened as a jazz club. Alan Sithler was the first owner. And then you get it to 1966. By the time the Cavern's owner during the golden era, a man called Ray McFall, he went through financial difficulties, and then all of a sudden the Cavern was closed. And by the time the Cavern Club reopened, it was no longer number 10 Matthew Street. It was number 8 to 12 Matthew Street. And so that is when you enter into a second phase of the Cavern Club's history. So you have 1957 to 1966, which is one phase, which was that legendary era of the Cavern's history, where it was dark, it was damp, it was dusty, it was smelly. The whole place stunk of toilet disinfectant because the toilets realistically didn't work. There was no working toilet in the entire cavern. So the waste just simply went into the bedrock of the cavern itself. So the only way to get rid of that waste and the smell was just to pour disinfectant over it. But by the time the cavern moved in 1966, they had working toilets in there. They had a fire exit in there. No longer did they have that legendary atmosphere that stunk of smoke and sweat, and the amps would get blown off because sweat had dripped onto them. All of a sudden it changed. All of a sudden the Cavern Club teenagers had grown up and they were in their early 20s, and the cavern no longer smelt. It was no longer dangerous. It no longer had that thrill. So you've got to consider that this isn't only a myth from this very day of, it's not the original cavern, it's not the cavern at all. And people had that attitude by 1966 when the Beatles were still topping the charts. But by 1973, the Cavern Club it was forced into a closure, which is a completely different era in the Cavern Club's history. From 1966, its entrance moved to exactly where it is to this very day. The original entrance became the fire exit of the club. And then in 1973, British Rail placed a compulsory purchase order on number 8 to 12 Matthew Street. They planned the demolition of the cavern to build a ventilation shaft for the city's underground railway loop. And to cut a very long story short, and of course there's many details which I'm sure you'll ask about, but it was never ever built. But in that time, the owners of the cavern decided to move the club to the other side of the street. And that was in 1973. And by 1976, it was no longer the cavern on the other side of the street. It was known as Revolution and then later changed its name to Eric's. And you might have heard of Eric's. Many people might have heard of Eric's. Eric's was legendary for the punks in Liverpool. So Matthew Street was at the forefront of another musical revolution, and that was the punks. The likes of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, The Clash, The Ramones, Echo and the Bunnymen, A Flock of Seagulls even have links to Eric's, Elvis Costello. The list of great people who came through Eric's goes on and on and on, but it was not the Cavern Club. And people ever since, because there was a sign on the wall which said the Cavern, because Revolution and Eric's was owned by Cavern Enterprises, it founded a myth that has never, ever, ever been shook, of course, even to this very day.
That explains it. And the entrance to Eric's, I feel like that's pointed to as the quote unquote cavern entrance, like the true cavern entrance. But it was only that for a short period of time, and it really wasn't even the cavern.
No, it wasn't. And realistically, by 1973, most of the city knew it wasn't the cavern. The city certainly shouted about the fact it wasn't the cavern. Anyone who visited Matthew Street, it's not the real cavern. It's not the place. So it was already happening then by 1973. So you had 1966, where the cavern became somewhere that was actually a little bit of a better class because it no longer stunk and it no longer had that legendary atmosphere and environment. So you already had people by 66 saying it wasn't a real cavern. And by 1973, the passions were ignited again. It's not the real cavern. And to make matters worse, there was a second myth. And this was the main myth, by the way, that happened back then. And it wasn't necessarily a myth. And this is what I'm saying. When you're saying was the cavern on the other side of the street, not the original cavern. And the cavern to this very day isn't on the other side of the street. But technically, yes. So there's a little bit of truth in all these myths. But the main myth that happened from 1973 until 1984 was that the Cavern Club had been demolished to become a car park. And that is probably to this very day the most famous myth, truthfully, that I've discovered. Whenever I see comments online or under YouTube videos, it's always that the Cavern is a car park.
I remember reading that when I was a teenager, and I was so sad. It's something that really devastates you as a Beatles fan, because every American Beatles fan dreams of going to Liverpool. That's like obviously like Mecca, and to know, or quote unquote know, that the Cavern is a car park. It's like, oh shit.
It is. It's devastating.
Why would I even go there?
Now, it's something that I told you when you visited the Cavern. In 1973, as I say, British Rail demolished number 8 to 12 Matthew Street. The buildings on ground level were levelled themselves. Bulldozers were brought in. The buildings were ripped down. And because British Rail, not Liverpool City Council, they wanted to build a ventilation shaft for the city's underground railway loop. So Liverpool City Council have unfortunately shouldered the blame of this for years, years and years. Again, still under YouTube comments and Facebook comments to this very day, is that the council demolished it, but it wasn't. It was British Rail. The problem is when they demolished the buildings and then they started trying to build the ventilation shaft, they discovered that there was water which flows underneath Matthew Street. So it prevented the demolition of the actual Cavern Club itself. So the Cavern Club underneath ground level still existed. The tops of the archways are being demolished to stop the build-up of gases. And of course, what happened then is that the cavern sat dormant until 1980. But what happened on ground level is that it was a bare patch of land, so everybody parked the cars on it. So again, you can see where that myth comes from, which is from 1973 until 1980. Every tourist from around the world who came to Matthew Street would leave saying, the Cavern Club's now a car park. There's people parking the
I
cars
parked my
exactly where the Cavern was. Exactly. And what a claim to fame that was for many people. I parked my car where the original Cavern was.
Like you say, there's like a kernel of truth in all of these myths.
It makes sense, but once you dig into the myths, for me, I see these myths every single day because my job is the unfortunate mix of telling people the history of the cavern, telling people all about these myths and how they came about, and then being a social media guy as well, and seeing these myths every single day and wanting to reply to every last one of them. And I just know I can't fight that battle. So it takes
Yeah.
a lot of mellowing out to sort of go, okay, I can't reply to all of these.
It must be so frustrating.
It is frustrating, and as I say, I think to round the story off, of course, it was in 1984, the Cavern Club was excavated. So it's again one of the famous myths is that the Cavern Club was demolished in 1973. The Cavern Club, in a very technical way, was not demolished in 1973. The warehouses above it were demolished in 73. The Cavern Club was then dismantled between 1980 and 1984 when an architect called David Backhouse excavated the Cavern Club. He excavated it, and then they would discover that the foundations weren't stable enough for it to be reopened, so they would then carefully dismantle it brick by brick and rebuild the cavern. And so this is what gets extremely confusing about it again, is because the Cavern Club, when it was reopened, they reopened it using the 1966 entrance as the main doorway, and the location of the original entrance would then become the location of the new fire exit of the Cavern Club for some reason. And this is what I mean again, there's certain things that we don't fully know the answers or the reasoning for, but we know that number 10 is occupied now by the Cavern Club. 70% of the original cavern's footprint is occupied by the current Cavern Club as well. The original stage location, all the original bricks, 15,000 of the original bricks to be very precise, now make up the Cavern Club since 1984 to this very day. So that's what makes the arguments about it not being the original cavern extremely confusing, because it's not the original cavern. The Cavern Club from 1957 to 1966 could not in any way be open in 2020. It'd be the most unsafe venue in the world. It was unsafe in 1966.
Yeah.
Could you imagine right now in 2020 going down into a dark, damp, dusty basement cellar where you crammed in with about 500 other kids? So that's Alan Sithner said that on the first night the cavern opened, they had 500 people in there.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It does, and that's what I mean. I think no matter what happens, the Cavern Club to this very day has a good history, well, a legendary history in of its own right. Many great people have performed here in modern times, including Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr stood on the stage as well. It's extremely frustrating to see people dismiss the cavern, because no matter what happened, if the original cavern was still around to this day, they would have to change it, and they'd have to change it to be very much like the current cavern today. It'd be impossible for it not to be.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things, and talking about the doorway, one of the things that's wonderful, as you say, the entrance now is the one from '66, but there's now like a big placard sort of near what was the original door. So thank God there's no mistaking that anymore. That I don't think that was there when I first went to Liverpool. But one of the things on your tour is, until you've had to recently modify it because of the pandemic, was going down the stairs. So you felt like you were kind of going in the original way, which was very exciting for me. I got to say, that was very cool.
Do you want to say it was exciting for me? As I mentioned earlier on, I was a huge Beatles fan. I used to go drinking in the Cavern 7, 8 years ago. and I'd listen to the musicians in complete and utter awe of it. I was in the Cavern, such a legendary venue. And then, of course, I studied it more, and then I eventually started working for the Cavern. And it was just before we started doing tours of the Cavern that the owners said, "Okay, we'll take you around. We'll show you every last bit of the venue." And I was over the moon. I got to walk
Yeah.
into that original location of the entrance, and it was a big deal for me. I will be honest, and it's something I have to be extremely honest about because the amount of scrutiny we receive as the Cavern Club as a venue, the amount of scrutiny our tour guides receive, that of course includes me. It's not the original entrance; it's the original location of the entrance. So, as I said a moment ago, the Cavern Club was fully excavated and then rebuilt. So it was dismantled brick by brick and then rebuilt using the same materials. So when they've rebuilt the Cavern Club, they've put the entrances in the same location. When you enter in, the cavern's 90 degrees turned to the side, in effect, and then the Cavern Club as a whole is actually bigger as well, because we've included an additional live lounge, which is the back room of the Cavern where Paul McCartney played in 2018 and 1999. But it's the original location of the entrance. So for me, what I find exciting is to walk in exactly where it would have been. And I'm talking it is exactly in that location. We know that based on pictures with the building opposite, from mirroring the images against each other. It's the exact location of the original entrance. And then you get to a certain point on the steps where you know that the old steps would have ended and you can't see it. There's no architectural design to show you that this is where the steps would have ended. But me being a guide, I've learned it over time that this is exactly where it would have ended. And then you know how further underground the current Cavern Club is, which works out to be about 8 steps, about 8 foot further underground. So yeah, I find it all very interesting, even as a fan. But then actually taking people around, I see people crying as they enter into that entrance. I get them on the live lounge stage at the end, and they have tears in their eyes, and it's beautiful to see that. Yeah, it really is.
Well, it's rare that you get such an intimate experience with a legendary historical venue. Like, this is really where it all happened. And we, as Beatles fans, obviously, like, this is the place we want to be in to be able to get into those details. It's very rare, especially to have somebody so knowledgeable. Some places you go and they're just sort of like, yeah, like it might have been here, might have been the next room over. We're not really sure. But to have that level of detail is like paradise.
Yeah. Liverpool still has a great culture of tour guides, and I think most major cities in the world right now, especially when I've travelled, and I haven't travelled as much as I'd like to, but the tour guides you mainly get around cities sometimes, students, which is great, by the way. I think students sometimes make the absolute best tour guides because they're full of
Mhm.
enthusiasm, they're full of passion, and that's what I think is half the battle with guiding in general. You've got to be passionate, you've got to be, enthusiastic, and if you've said the same tour script 1,000 times, it's going to get a little bit boring. It's going to get a bit stale. But Liverpool still has a great amount of guides who are passionate, and it's a real profession in this city, and it's a real passion. People are desperate to tell people the authentic history. In fact, sometimes you just meet a random Scouser on Matthew Street, a random Liverpudlian. He'll just come over as if he's a tour guide, and he's not. It happens all the time. It's as if every Scouser is a tour guide, and it's came out in the culture of the actual profession in this city. To be a guide's actually a point of pride. And a few years back, I was like, I really don't want to be one. And then all of a sudden, a bit further down the line, you realise it's a really good thing, and it's a great city to be a tour guide in as well, because there's a significant amount of history here, and it's all exciting history. It's not boring history. It's real, cool stuff. Like,
I meet a lot of tour guides in the grapes at like midnight after, I don't know, like, yeah, a lot of experts
yeah,
there.
I meet them as well. It's cool.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I
Then
love
they
it.
get up and do karaoke, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I a lot of great tour guides.
Well, it's awkward for me as a young guy as well, 'cause I get it. I drink on Matthew Street, and sometimes people come over, "It's not the real Cavern, don't you?" And it's like,
Oh,
"Man, I
true.
am minding my own business. Come on, please don't do this to me. Don't
Oh,
say those
no.
horrible words to me." We know it's
Yeah,
not the original, but I don't understand it. It is a strange thing, and it's only the Cavern that gets it really. But people seem so passionate to say that. Of course, this week we've had a significant amount of press internationally, and
right.
underneath every news article around the world, you can almost guarantee it's the first thing people say. And you think, why is this an international thing? I understand it. In Liverpool, people are still annoyed that the Cavern was demolished in 1973 by British Rail, and they've got those feelings, the emotion about it. But I don't understand why it can be publicised in Australia, and some random Australian will pop up and say it's not the original Cavern. It's like it's a global phenomenon just to say that as a quote,
Well, everybody's an expert on the internet,
Of
so
course.
the random Australian wants to be the one to be the truth sayer here and
Breaking
to
news. Yeah.
yeah, right? To set the record straight, that's the expert, really.
Yeah.
I would love to touch on that if you can, because, we have heard the headlines this week that, quote unquote, the Cavern's in trouble because of COVID. There's a chance it'll close and all of that.
Truthfully, Liverpool as a city is in a sad position at the moment. I think we all are. I mean, it'd be unfair for me to just say it's the Cavern, or unfair for me to say it's Liverpool as a city, or England, or the United Kingdom. It's something we're all struggling with, isn't it? And I think every business is struggling. In
Right.
Liverpool, our music scene is legendary. And it was unfortunate that just a few weeks ago it was announced that the Zanzibar, and it's somewhere that realistically, nationally, it's not even that well known, but in Liverpool, it's a legendary original music venue, and that's folded. And then we have other
Mm,
venues in the city, live music venues that are currently struggling as well. We're all in this position in the city. The arts scene in Liverpool is incredible, and we're all struggling. We face a real reality in our theatres, in our pubs, it's across the board, and it's a scary time for all of us. But for the Cavern Club's losing a significant amount of money per week, and that's in running costs. It's not necessarily in sales. In sales, we're losing an astronomical amount, but we'll be fine. It's something that we were very clear to say from the offset. We're still in a position where we can reopen the Cavern Club. We're not closing, and it was not necessarily unfortunate to see the headlines run as the Cavern Club is facing closure, but it's many people have came away with the impression we're facing a media closure, and it's not the case. We're excited that in 1 week's time to the day we're going to be launching our virtual Beat Week Festival, something which has been difficult to organise. It's from 27 different countries. It's about 180 different videos that we have
oh my
of
gosh.
bands all around the world. They've sent them to us. We've got messages from special guests. That's going to happen. We're opening up the Cavern after 5 months next Thursday, and it's an exciting time for us. I say next Thursday, but by the time this podcast goes out, it might be in like 4 days' time. I don't know, 27th of August. Yeah. But yeah, we're in a position where we can open, and if we open and things go well, then it's happy days. I was about to say back to normal, but we're not going to be back to normal for a little while, are we? It's
God, if only, if
if only.
only.
But
Yeah.
no,
I mean, I know a lot of us are chomping at the bit to get back to Liverpool and pump money into the tourism there. If we all, I don't know, ordered merch from the Cavern, would that help?
there is some beautiful merchandise. If I can recommend any piece of merchandise from the Cavern, apart from the beautiful Cavern face masks that we've now got in stock, I don't know if you've seen them online. Have you not seen the Cavern face
No.
masks? I thought you'd absolutely love them. Yeah, and we've
I
got a
yeah, I
Cavern face mask which is just basic and it says the Cavern Club Liverpool on it, which is great. And then we have I think over in the States, you call them a buff. Yeah, we call them a snood or a snud. Yeah,
I don't know what either of those things are.
it's basically like a balaclava in effect. It's like a neck scarf that you pull over your
Oh,
face, and that's the whole Cavern back wall. It's the Mondrian painting of the Cavern's back wall as a snood. So that's quite cool.
that's
If I
awesome.
can recommend anything for anyone, it's the Cavern's documentary. So for the Cavern's 60th anniversary, one of the big projects was not only to launch a 60th anniversary Cavern book, which if you buy that Cavern book, it tells you the full history of the Cavern Club in every last detail, including having the original plans of the Cavern, including the 1966, the 1973 demolition plans, and the 1984 reopen plans all together side by side, which is an unbelievable resource for anyone who is passionate about the Cavern's history. But we also embarked upon a documentary, and the documentary is absolutely unbelievable because it's loads of old footage of the Cavern Club, current footage of the Cavern Club. Again, it covers the demolition and the rebuild and the reopening of the Cavern Club too. But that the documentary, it's cheap. It's I say cheap. It's not cheaply made, but it's cheap to buy. And it's in US format, and UK and European format, and it's incredible as a sort of 1 hour documentary to understand the history and legend of the Cavern Club and the fact it's an institution and it's still a current live music venue to this very day. It's certainly worthwhile watching. So if you're going to try and say what merch should we buy to support you, I'd say buy the documentary. It's literally it supports not only the Cavern Club, but it supports everyone else in understanding the history of it too.
Oh, amazing. That's so cool. Yeah, I am gonna later today definitely get some face mask action up in here, and check out the documentary. Yeah, so this has been amazing. I'm so glad we finally had you on. It's been a long time coming, and it's been totally worth it. International Beatle Week starts the 27th of August. We'll put a link in our show notes and we'll put it on our socials and everything. Is there anything else you want to address or talk about, Dale, before we let you go?
You know what? I've got nothing left to address. I've got a second bowl of scouse waiting for me as we speak. So I'll go
That
tuck
sounds
into
great.
that.
That sounds lovely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been so much fun. You'll have to come back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I've honestly really enjoyed chatting to you. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And we end, as we always end, with our favorite Beatles obsession of the moment. Allison, what's yours?
Well, I sort of previewed it in our intro, but here's the thing. This is going to sound absolutely crazy. So Strawberry Field, I talked about it when I came back from Liverpool in February, has a museum and they have the grounds there now, and they have an awesome gift shop with a ton of cool stuff, which is what I got for our giveaway. And the reason I ordered stuff from Strawberry Field, as much as I'd like to say it was just for a giveaway, it's because they have the best candles ever. And I don't know how they make these candles. I don't know where they get them, but the smell of them is so good. And I haven't found anything like that potent before. My favorite is this orange mandarin candle. And it just is so, it's like juicy. You can like taste the orange. It's crazy. I know it's crazy that I ordered these from Liverpool, but I got them this week. And then I also ordered little strawberry clotted cream biscuits that came.
Ooh.
And that was amazing.
Also from Strawberry Field?
Yes, everything came from Strawberry. Well, I don't think they were made there, but they come from England, so they're legit. For our giveaway, I have 2 Strawberry Field tote bags and a bunch of pens that are very cool, and they're different colors, and they say Strawberry Field on them. So yeah, good stuff. And it's always fun to get a package from Liverpool. It's all taped up, nice and secure.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome. Don't they have strawberry candles too, or is it just orange is the better flavor?
oh no, so let me just give you the rundown here. So they have orange mandarin. I did get a strawberry scented candle, and I got I think it's like a pina colada sort of flavor. It's like coconut and pineapple, very tropical. And
Yum.
the one that they're out of, which was such a bummer, is like a linen candle that is, it's so good. It smells so like clean and fresh. So yeah, I'll just have to order more, stuff from Strawberry Field when that comes back in stock.
They should hire you over at Strawberry Fields to pimp some of this stuff out. You are really the ambassador. I didn't even
know,
know
right?
they sold most of these things.
Hashtag not sponsored, guys. But if Strawberry Field wants to sponsor me as their official candle spokesperson, I'm not going to turn that down. I will sell out for that, for free candles. That's all you have to give me, Strawberry Field.
I love this. This is so weird.
I know, it's so weird. I may or may not be burning one right now. Also,
May or may not be.
Yeah, and that's not a lie. That I didn't get paid to say that. Again, if you want to pay me, cool. Pay me in candles.
There you go.
Anyway, I'll stop shilling to like the Salvation Army. Erica, what is your favorite Beatles related thing in the week?
This is one of the weirdest things I've seen in a long time, and I'm a little bit obsessed with it. Earlier this month, the elders of Walpole Island, which is a First Nation reserve in southwestern Ontario in Canada, nominated Paul McCartney for chief of Walpole Island. Paul McCartney and Ryan Reynolds were both nominated for chief of Walpole Island. So
what? That's a lot to unpack.
It's very strange. They are neither of them are members of the First Nation, though Ryan Reynolds is at least Canadian. There is no rule that the nominated chief has to be a member of the nation. So they chose Paul McCartney and Ryan Reynolds. Indigenous Services Canada has tried to contact both Paul and Ryan Reynolds to see if they wanted to accept their nomination. And they need to accept nomination by 4 p.m. next Thursday in order to stay on the ballot. And I hope they do. It's just so weird.
I mean, out of every human on the earth, they arrive at Paul and Ryan Reynolds.
It's very strange. I can't find one article that says why they wanted to do this. It's a fairly nominal role. I mean, it's not, he wouldn't be coming in and actually doing any governing or figurehead, but it's still a real role in their community, and it's still an election that that will take place on September 19th. There are 12 candidates nominated for chief, so there are 10 other people, most likely better qualified than Paul McCartney. But you never know. I mean, if they get in contact with him, he can stay on the ballot, and maybe he has a new title to add to Sir Paul McCartney.
Chief Paul McCartney?
I guess it would be Chief Paul McCartney of Walpole Island in Ontario.
There's some person on Walpole Island who, like, this has been their goal their whole life, and they've been working towards it. They've been, like, doing community service and, like, championing the community and just been, like, a model citizen. And then all of a sudden it's like, nah, we want Paul McCartney and Ryan Reynolds. One of those two. That's cool.
Maybe we can trace this back to, like, a fan club.
Maybe. I'm going to be absolutely riveted, and I like that their election's happening on Brian Epstein's birthday.
Maybe it all ties together. It just all leads up to this pinnacle of having Paul McCartney as the chief.
Wow. I'm going to be keeping my ear to the ground on this, because it's too weird to not care about.
Yes, we will be following the story, and 4 p.m. on Thursday, Ontario time, we will find out.
If they accept. If
they can't be contacted to accept the nomination. So, Paul, pick up the phone.
Accept the nomination.
So congratulations, Paul McCartney.
Yes,
I really hope you're the chief.
Oh my God. Amazing.
Damn, this is a weird story.
That's odd. This is great. Our Beatles related things of the whenever this time were pretty weird. It's great. Yours weirder than mine. So congrats. Hats off to you.
Thanks. But yours smells better than mine?
Sure. You can say that.
Anyway, thanks for listening to BC the Beatles. And as always, please subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, or wherever you're listening right now. Give us a rating and review so other Beatlemaniacs can find us.
Yes, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll be posting photos from this episode and beyond, and across all platforms we are at BC the Beatles. Remember, you can always email us, including if you've posted a review and want to enter our giveaway, at bcthebeatles@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time on BC the Beatles.
Bye.
Bye.